Hi, I'm Labor Allen. Thank you for joining me today. I look forward to this uh, particular webcast. It is something that's very near and dear to my heart. Stress, worry, anxiety, those are definitely things that I have dealt with throughout my life, especially at certain times of my life. So I welcome you to this webcast. I think you'll find some things that are helpful, and hopefully you'll also find it to be interesting and entertaining as well. Before we get really into the subject, please make sure that your volume is turned up. And if you're watching on a mobile device, you might want to set it to vibrate so that the sound doesn't get in your way. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. My name, again, is Labron Allen. I'm a board-certified clinical nutritionist and traditional naturopath here in Victoria, Texas. Been practicing for 13 years at my clinic, the Natural Health Clinic. I have helped well over 2,000 people now in my professional career, and to date have about 34,000 office visits under my belt. So that's a little bit about me. Now, as far as the difficulty that I've had with stress or worry, the earliest times that I can think of as having stress, anxiety, I would call it. First time was when I was going to school for the first time. I could not go alone by myself. I had a significant amount of shyness, a huge amount of fear, and I just remember having a great deal of stress at that time. The second time that I remember about worry, I was probably about 8 years old, and there was ups and downs in my family at that time. At the time, it was specifically downs, and I remember wondering if and when my parents were going to get a divorce. So I remember that particular time in my life, early life, as far as having stress and worry. So what is your experience? If you would go ahead and type down in that chat box that you see at the bottom what your particular experiences have been, I'm sure that we'll find that we can all pretty much identify with each other. And if I have time throughout the webcast, I will get to your particular experience or discuss that in particular. So there are three types of stress from three different categories or different areas of the body. The first one being physical. So what that means is that certain organs, certain glands are dysfunctional, and those are perpetuating, if not even creating, the stress, the worry, the anxiety that we're feeling. There's also neurological effects of stress and anxiety. And finally, psychological, which is dealing with certain kinds of patterns of thought. And so we're going to break down each one of these in the webcast today and go into greater detail so that you understand not only the steps that you should take to totally destroy stress, but also what is creating it at the same time, so we can get a better ability, an empowering ability to handle what's happening within our body. So a quick poll. How many of you out there who's watching have woken up between, let's say, 1 to 3 a.m. and you're laying in bed, maybe your spouse is snoring beside you, and your mind is just going pop, 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 round and round and round and round. Not necessarily worrying about anything per se, but definitely going from one thing to the next, the next, the next, the next. Your mind is racing. And certainly when that's happening, you are not going to go back to sleep. So how many of you can identify with that? Again, just put it right down there in the chat box, and we'll start seeing that a lot of us are experiencing the same things. How about this one? How many of you had laid in bed in the evening and your heart is thudding, ba-bum, 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 and there's this internal feeling of intensity, anxiety that's welling up within you. You're wondering, oh my God, am I having a heart attack? And it gets worse and worse and worse. How many of you have actually experienced that as well? Well, let me tell you, those things, that is a physical cause of stress. So now you know if you experience those things, you know that it's related to a physical cause. So let's break this down. The most simple example of physical cause of stress would be your thyroid dysfunction. You know that there can be hypo, which is lowered function, or hyper, which is increased function of the thyroid gland. And usually when there's hypo, it can really be either way, but typically when there's hypo function, there's going to be depression. Obviously, that's causing psychological, emotional changes. Or if there's hyperfunction, overactive function, there's going to be internal feelings of anxiety and not really any reason per se of unknown origin. So each organ and each gland is actually responsible for specific emotions. So here's what I mean by that. Kind of breaking it down into a flow chart, so to speak. In our brain, there's a system. It's called the limbic system. And the limbic system is responsible for generating this raw emotion. Now, just because we have an emotion doesn't mean that we feel it, and it doesn't mean that our body responds to it correctly. So there has to be some kind of mechanism that allows that to happen to the body, and it's really somewhat fascinating how that happens. So you have the limbic system. It's generating all these raw emotions within the brain. And so what happens is it goes to the hippocampus, the hypothalamus, and the hypothalamus kind of analyzes. It's like a computer running software saying, okay, well, this happens. You have the zeros and the ones and this many zeros and this many ones, and boom, it means that we have anger. Okay, so now we know what the emotion is. Now, how is the body supposed to react to that emotion? Well, the hypothalamus job is to send to all the downstream glands the proper response. Okay, so thyroid, you need to secrete these hormones. Adrenals, you need to secrete that hormones. Liver, get ready. You're going to have to respond to this particular emotion. So in the case of, let's say, anger, we're going to have increased metabolism. We're going to have increased blood pressure, blood flow, respiration. Muscles become tense. And the way that the body is responding to that emotion is through different kinds of chemicals, body biochemicals that are called. And so each one of our organs actually will respond, specific organs will respond to specific body biochemicals. And so that means, in effect, that our organs are responding to these different emotions. So each organ tends to have specific emotions that it responds to. And so what that means is that if there is dysfunction in these specific organs, that will be a tendency for us to feel more stress, anxiety, even anger, worry, different kinds of emotions. So dysfunction can actually create these kinds of feelings within us, these stress and worry or anxiety, or it can perpetuate these feelings as well. It can work both ways. So, for example, liver tends to react mostly to anger, lungs to grief, kidneys to anxiety, insecurity, fear. Bladder reacts to being pissed off. Is that the P word? So believe it or not, it is. Large intestines, so the large bowel, people who tend to be constipated, they are more dogmatic than others. They have difficulty in letting things go. So it's very interesting to know that specific areas of the body are responsible for specific organs, and if those particular organs are having an issue or dysfunction, guess what? We're going to have a tendency towards those feelings, towards more stress, towards more security or fear. Now, what really helps in the physical level of feeling the stress and feeling the worry is to find and eliminate any food allergies that are creating dysfunctions. That goes a long way towards helping with your stress and your worry. Also, there are specific supplements. There are specific supplements that can support liver, kidneys, brain function, neurotransmitters. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So you ready for another poll? Now, who's ever experienced this one? Who's experienced anxiety to the point that their hands started shaking? I know I have. I've definitely been through some situations several times that have created that effect. Now, who's ever been in a conversation? Who's ever been giving a presentation in front of a board, a meeting, a seminar, maybe a webcast, and has been anxious enough that you found it more difficult to find the words that you're looking for? Or you say a word, it comes out of your mouth, and it's not the word that you were looking for, thinking of. And I have most certainly experienced that as well. Well, guess what? You have experienced neurological stress. So we're going to break down the effects of neurological stress next. Apparently that poll was very important. Had to do it twice, see that? So neurological. So there are certain brain systems that play a key role in stress, worry, and anxiety, and we're going to talk about the most common ones, 3 of them. There are actually 5 brain systems in all, but we're going to be discussing the most common ones, the ones that I find most frequently dealing with clients who are having problems with stress, adrenal exhaustion, coping with insecurity, fears, and anxiety, depression. The first one up is called the cingulate system. One of the main symptoms that a person is going to experience who has dysfunction or deficiency within the cingulate system is that they are going to be craving sweets or carbohydrates. So if you find yourself craving the pasta, the lasagna, wanting those sweets, cookies, cakes, ice cream, candy, pies, on and on and on, this is a pretty bad time of the year for that, right? If you find yourself really craving these things, and it's really common, then I will bet you that you're having a cingulate system deficiency or imbalance in some way. Specifically, what the cingulate system deficiencies or dysfunctions will create are feelings of worry. People will also tend to say no automatically. You ask them a question, hey, you want to go watch a movie? No. And then 10 minutes later, they'll come back, yeah, well, on second thought, that sounds like a pretty good idea. Let's go watch that movie. So those people, that's a sure sign that they're having problems and dysfunctions within their cingulate system. Chronic pain, so that can be pain. It tends to be pain throughout the body muscularly, but it can also be pain in joints, unless there's some obvious trauma that's occurred. That can be a cingulate system issue. Now, in these brain systems, they are controlled, they're modulated, they're regulated by certain hormones, neurotransmitters they're called, and specifically to the cingulate system is serotonin. I'm sure you've heard about that many times. There are SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, one of the most common forms of antidepressants, for example. And the cingulate system, it specifically needs serotonin in order to be regulated. By the way, individuals with cingulate system deficiencies, they'll tend to be overthinkers. They can't stop thinking. They can't ever turn their mind off. They can't ever relax that mind. And that is dysfunctions with serotonin. That brain system requires an amino acid called L-tryptophan. Without it, it's not going to be working very well. And we're going to be talking about where in your diet you can get sources of these different amino acids that I'll be mentioning as we go along in the webcast today. So temporal lobe. Temporal lobe is the next brain system up. On this area, these areas in the brain, you have 2 lobes, right and left. And guess what? This is the system, when it's having a dysfunction, is specifically responsible for those word-finding problems. Darn it. That is very irritating when you're up there in front of people and you just can't think of that darn word. But it's right there on the tip of your tongue. So it's the temporal lobe that is responsible for that particular issue. Temporal lobe dysfunctions also cause emotional instability. No funny thing there. And it is modulated by a neurotransmitter. You may not be as familiar with this neurotransmitter. It's called GABA, G-A-B-A. And by the way, neurotransmitters, they do one of 2 things. They're either stimulatory or they are inhibitory. And GABA tends to be inhibitory. And it is actually inhibitory of thyroid function as well. In fact, people can have an overactive thyroid because their levels of GABA are not high enough. The next one, and this is probably one that you're very familiar with. You just don't realize it. I'll tell you why you may be familiar with it in a moment. And that's the basal ganglia. Isn't that a fun word to say? Ganglia. Just say that. How's that feel? It's a kind of a fun word. So the basal ganglia produces anxiety, nervousness. It's responsible for panic attacks. Individuals who have issues and dysfunctions with the basal ganglia will tend to be ones who predict the worst outcome. You say, hey, what do you think about? And it's like, oh boy, that's the most calamitous, apocalyptic scenario that's possible. Know anyone like that? Hopefully you're not like that. But if you notice that within yourself, realize that that's not you. That's not your personality, even though everyone may have said it is, and say, oh my God, I don't want to be around that person. They're just a killjoy. They're so cynical. They're blah, 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 pessimist. In reality, they may very well have dysfunctions with their basal ganglia, and there's help out there for that. See, that's the thing. Everything that we're talking about today on this webcast, there is help for. I've helped many people with these different kinds of issues, and if they follow the step-by-step plan as we work together, it's not that hard to create a real beneficial effect for these individuals. So you don't have to be dealing with all this stuff. There is help, and it's not pharmaceutical induced. None of these things that we're talking about are psychotropic medication deficiencies. All right, they're not antidepressant deficiencies. They're not Wellbutrin deficiencies or Prozac deficiencies. These are deficiencies in certain amino acids, certain hormone precursors, certain minerals. That's what these areas of the brain have to have in order to manufacture the proper levels of these neurotransmitters. It's not a horrible medication that's going to have all kinds of terrible side effects throughout your body. That's not what your body's needing. So there is real help. Basal ganglia, it is modulated by dopamine. Oh, by the way, basal ganglia, remember I mentioned tremors in that poll? Sure enough, that's what the basal ganglia controls. Motor control. Also, it acts as a delimiter. What a delimiter is there's delimiters that it's an electronic device that are put into vehicles of all types, cars, trucks, motorcycles, race cars. Maybe not race cars, I'm not sure. But what it does is it limits the top speed of that vehicle. So even if the engine was able to make it go faster, electronically, it can only go to a certain level. 110, that's it. That's as far as it goes no matter what. That's a delimiter. So the basal ganglia acts as an anxiety delimiter. Hey, can only go that level, that's it. But when it becomes dysfunctional, the sky is the limit for anxiety, for panic, for nervousness. So it's not fun. And as far as amino acids, protein, the basal ganglia requires L-tyrosine. So a deficiency, remember we talked about physical, so now we have an interaction between the brain and the physical organs and glands. Makes sense, right? Basically, our brain is the computer telling the organs and glands what to do, with the nervous system being the communication pathway in between, specifically the autonomic nervous system. So a deficiency in any of these brain systems, one of the main things that it does is drive the adrenals to exhaustion, drives the thyroid into insanity. It depends on what happens. If it's hypofunction, then you're going to be obviously have hypothyroid, or if it's hyperfunction, it could even go into a Graves' disease. Most common nowadays is Hashimoto's, which is autoimmune thyroiditis. And I have many patients that are dealing with Hashimoto's and are able to get great help with some of the things that we're discussing here today. And of course, the problem is that once these brain systems engage these glands and these hormones, and now we have the other organs. Remember, I talked about how the organs are responsible for certain body biochemicals. So you're feeling all this stuff, and your body's reacting to all this stuff, and it creates further deficiencies, further exhaustion. It's obviously a terrible downward spiral that the person gets into. And so the steps that we're going to be talking here in just a moment will help you, if you're in these spirals, to get out of that particular spiral. Now, there are some foods that are commonly consumed, and see the foods I have in quotes, they're commonly consumed and they force. Notice my words. I'm not, just thinking up words. These are specific words. They force the body to respond in certain ways. The body has no choice. You put this in your mouth, boom, it's going to respond that way. There is no biochemical choice. There is no system, organ, glandular, neurological system choice. It must do it. And so it forces these brain systems, these endocrine systems into hyper or hypofunction. So removing these products will result in much reduced feelings of worry, anxiety, and stress. And we'll talk about what those are in just a minute. And the greatest offenders, was that just a minute or what, are grains, sugar, and processed foods at all. Now, notice I said grains. Right now, gluten, it's the trendy thing. I look like Richard Nixon. I'm not a crook. Anyway, it's very trendy, gluten, but that's not the major problem. It may be a problem, but not the major problem. There is a problem with grains for most people, minimum 75%. And I personally think it's much higher than that. Sugar, well, if the other 25% remaining from the 75 weren't affected by the grain, guess what? They are most certainly going to be affected by the sugar. And then processed foods, they mug you. Processed foods mug you. Mug means robbing you. They rob you of these nutrients that these systems we're talking about require. So you eat it, boom. You just got held at gunpoint and robbed of the hormonal neurotransmitter precursors. How's that? Is that a smart thing to do? It isn't. So don't eat these things that force your body to respond in specific ways that are so detrimental to you, especially if you're having stress. Think about what do people do? They get under stress. Oh, I got to have comfort food. So they go eat these cookies, these cakes, this ice cream, these huge bowls of pasta at Johnny Carino's or Olive Garden or whatever. And they rob these very things that they're stuffing into their mouth, rob their body further, rob the very systems that are having a problem in the first place, reducing the stress even more. And so now they just have more and more stress. Oh my God, I just have to have more comfort food. I don't know what it is. Stop eating the crap. Just don't eat the crap. Next poll. Who's ever found themselves constantly worrying about something, and no matter how hard you tried, you just freaking can't stop thinking about it? Wow, I'll raise my hand, man. That is me for sure. So if that's you, just write it down right in the chat box, and I guarantee you this is a really common thing for individuals to feel. Well, guess what? If you've ever experienced that, that is a psychological category of stress. Psychological stress is caused by recurrent, habitual patterns of thinking. And so what we have to do is find a way to drive a stake into that kind of thinking and get it to stop. First step, we have to realize it's happening. Usually it's so common and been so frequent throughout our life that now it's this white noise. We don't even realize we're doing it. We don't even realize we have it. So how could we possibly change the habit? So we must become aware of it. Very first step. Excuse me. Now, the reason that we have these patterns in the first place, most likely it's because they served us well. When we were a child, they helped us accomplish something. We didn't have any other way of dealing with it. And so we were able to survive as a child due to these particular thinking patterns. Or they may have served us at, later in life, adult life, in certain situation that we were in for a period of time we couldn't think of any other way of dealing with that situation. But now, once we're out of those situations, once we're no longer a child, these aren't appropriate ways of responding. But unfortunately, it's now a habit. And so every time it just kicks in there. That program, the gears start whirring around, and that's the way we react once again. And we just can't stop it. So what do? We're going to talk about it. No doubt this is, from what I've seen clinically, one of the most challenging areas to deal with. The reason being is this. What did I say about the foods that rob your brain systems, rob your organs of these different nutrients? Don't eat it. Or if we need support of these areas, we just take the supplement that supports it. Those things, believe it or not, because so many people find them challenging, it's easy. That's the first step. That's the foundation. Without those foundations, without those underpinning legs, there's no way we're going to fix these habitual things. Think about it. If we have neurological or physical stresses and that drives this worry, this anxiety within us, and we try to stop the recurring habits, it's not going to happen because the body's forcing us to feel this way. So then how are we going to keep breaking into the habit? It's just not going to happen. The foundational legs to the table of wellness, 4 legs, food, supplementation, definitely 2 of them. All right. So I already mentioned that in order to change it, it requires consciously noting that it is occurring. That is the first step. The next thing, once we notice that's occurring, when it occurs, use this retraining visualization. It's very simple. In fact, it's so simplistic, you may discard it because of its simplicity. Don't do it. It is incredibly effective, likely due to its simplicity. So here's how you do it. When you're having the stress, when you're having this constant worry that you can't break through, all right, imagine that you have the image, that picture, like it's printed on a picture. Kodak film, 8.5 by 11, paper, whatever. But you have it printed, and you are looking at it, you're seeing it. If the worry's in the future about, what you're going to happen to your kid, or in the past about what you did and maybe it was a huge mistake and now you're going to live as a pauper in a street corner surrounded by rats and hopefully cats eating the rats, whatever it is. You imagine that stress. You imagine that it's on a picture. And now you take that picture, you're vividly feeling it, you're feeling all that worry, and it's in that picture, that image you're looking at is charged with all that anxiety, and you take that photo and you stick it into a powerful paper shredder. And you feel it grab. Feel those gears start grabbing into that page, into that photograph, and it starts shredding it into little bits, and it dumps into the waste product basket. Doesn't that feel good? That stress is removed finally, thank God. And then in its place, see, now you have a hole. You have this worry, you've just destroyed that image, and you have a hole. What are you going to replace it with? What you replace it with is a feeling and an image of when you felt the most self-confident that you can possibly think of. And you hold that image, whatever it was, whatever age it was, it doesn't matter. Maybe it was a recent event where you landed the contract, or as a kid you were number 1 in some kind of academic or athletic activity. Or maybe it's when you met your spouse and you knew that they had fallen in love with you. You were in love with them. Whatever it was that created a strong sense of security. Imagine it. Put it in that place. Feel it strongly. And then the key to really getting this visualization to work is every time you have these thoughts of worry going on in your mind, you note it, you shred it, you replace it. You do it over and over and over. So here's a challenge to you. I challenge you over the next 21 days to do 2 things. The first thing is to remove grain totally from your diet and sugar totally from your diet. It's only 21 days. Out of how many years? If you're lucky, 90. If you're common, 78. Okay? And nowadays you live long, but those aren't even very good years. Look at how many people are in carts hauling themselves around, can't walk, knee pain at 45. It's ridiculous. That's another subject, another webcast that we'll do. But nonetheless, it's only 21 days out of your entire life. Get rid of the grain, get rid of the sugar, write down how you start feeling as far as your worry, your stress, your anxiety. You'll find it's better. Give it a rating. 0, no stress. 5, horrible. Want to go jump off a building, whatever it is. And then the second challenge is over the course of the next 21 days, use this visualization every single time you catch yourself worrying. All right? And again, record it. Note how you feel day by day, and you'll notice that you get more and more and more able to cope with the stresses that would have sent you off the rocker in the past. You'll find that you respond differently to individuals who made you want to strangle them. You'll start responding differently because you are changing. You are becoming closer to the real potential that is possible for yourself. Can you imagine? It's incredible what you can do. It really is. I just hope that you take me up on this challenge. So again, the key is to constantly and consistently use the visualization. Okay, so you ready for the 6 steps? You ready for the plan? Here it is. First one, already talked about it. Remove foods that are causing the deficiency and forcing the physical and neurological processes that engender the stress, anxiety, and worry. Number 2, add high-quality proteins that give your neurological system the amino acids. Remember, tryptophan, tyrosine, those are amino acids. You get them for protein that you eat. They're essential amino acids. All right? Highest levels, guess what? Not in vegetables. Highest levels are in animal proteins. 4 categories of animal proteins: meat, fish, fowl, and eggs. Eggs are really high in tryptophan, for example, but I'd only get them local, organic, free range, good stuff. So you need to add those proteins to get the amino acids so that your neurotransmitters can be at the levels that they should be. Most people's aren't. That's why they're freaking on all kinds of, antidepressant and psychotropic medications and Xanax and all kinds of stuff. Step number 3, take supplements. What about that idea? You know that there's supplements that truly support thyroid, adrenals, all organs, even these specific brain reflexes we talked about, these brain systems, the cingulate, the basal ganglia, the temporal lobe, limbic, all right, prefrontal cortex, all of them. Didn't even mention those in the webcast, but there are supplements that give those areas of the brain exactly what they need. One of them that I use in my clinic is called Apex Energetics. There's others out there. I don't have experience in using them. I have very good experience using Apex Energetics, and that's why I keep using it. It freaking works. I wouldn't use something that doesn't work. I need to have results in my clients. Otherwise, guess what? I don't get more clients, and that means bad business, right? So the supplements that I use, you have to understand that there's a huge difference in supplements, and that's really a whole webcast in its own. And if you are interested in that information, I will create a webcast about that. But here it is, a quick rundown, as quick as I can make it. Realize that 99% of all supplements that are out there on any market, no matter how much they're touted, no matter what medical doctor is selling them, or Josh Axe or Dr. Oz or Mercola or Natural News, Mike Adams, the constituents, the components of those supplements are manufactured by huge pharmaceutical companies. There are synthetic chemicals that are put into those supplements. I don't care what they say, that's where it comes from. So when you're purchasing those supplements, guess what? You're supporting the freaking pharmaceutical companies. Oftentimes people say, I don't want to, support pharmaceutical companies. They're doing all kinds of horrible. Well, but you're buying supplements that have their stuff in it. You need to become aware. You need to study these things. So what's going on? Realize that the natural health industry is just like the pharmaceutical industry. It's into money. And there's huge amounts of money. Do you realize that the natural health industry is reaching $100 billion a year? That's gigantic. All right. It's not to the level of medicine yet, but it's getting there. It's 1/10 trillion a year for medicine, 100 billion a year for natural health, and growing quickly. One of the fastest growing industries in the entire world. There's a lot of deception out there, folks. Most of it is deceptive. All right. Make sure that the supplements you get are truly whole food. I am stressing the word truly. There's lots out there now claiming to be whole food. They're not. They may have originally come from whole food, but then the manufacturing processes, they use too high of heat. They use too much moisture. And what does that do? When you use high heat and boil down asparagus, do you have nutrients in there? Hell no, you don't have nutrients in there. Same thing occurs when you make a tablet supposedly from whole food concentrate. All right? So realize that that's what most of these things are. That's not even mentioning the garbage at Sam's and Costco and, it's terrible, the state of affairs. And so what happens, people take these things, they're synthetic, so it toxifies them. They don't even realize they're from coal tar and cyanide gas and Kodak film finishing products and hexane and all kinds of solvents that they use to extract these things. So petrochemicals, carcinogenic kinds of toxins. And they're also fractionated, which means that they're not the complete complex of nutrients and enzymes and cofactors and trace minerals that were in with the original supplement or substance as it was in food. And so as you ingest these different supplements, you're actually creating more deficiencies in other areas of your body. It's a mess. Okay, so you must be aware of what kind of supplements that you're using. I mentioned Apex Energetics. It's very good. They're sold to healthcare professionals only, licensed professionals only. Standard Process, I also have used that for coming up to 14 years now. They've been around since 1929. They're truly our whole food. They've had a patented process since 1929 for very room temperature processing, low moisture. So just be aware of what you're putting into your body. Don't trust anyone. Don't trust me. Look into it yourself. But anyway, there are supplements that support those areas of the body and also supplements specifically to increase neurotransmitters. Excuse me one moment. Let me wet my whistle. Talking too much here. It's gotten my throat dry. Step number 4. We're coming up to the last ones, guys. Exercise. Oh my God, said the bad word. I said the E word, exercise. It's best when you're trying to destroy worry and stress to exercise twice a week. Not more than that. That starts stressing the body. Again, another webcast. Most people exercise way too much and it starts causing more stress to their body. Only 25 to 30 minutes. If you're exercising longer than that, you're not exercising hard enough. And it should be resistance or weight-bearing exercise. Bench presses, shoulder presses, squats, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be using barbells or even weight machines. You can use your own body weight. You can do push-ups on the floor. You can do squats against the wall, enough so that your body fatigues. And what happens is that as you push the glycogen stores, which is glucose, out of your muscles, body moves into the cells, it gets rid of the cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone, activates the cingulate system, all the different things that we'll be discussing tonight. And here's a secret, folks. Guess what it does as well? This kind of exercise, resistance weight bearing, studies have shown that it helps pre-diabetes and diabetes. That's right. Because it sensitizes the cells to insulin once again. It's a secret. Number 5, use the visualization exercise constantly, and I should also put consistently. That's the key. If you do it, it'll work. And step number 6, de-stress and retrain your body and brain. using HeartMath and Muse. HeartMath and Muse are two tools that I use on a daily basis, and depending on how I feel, what's going on mentally and how I feel physically, that actually tells me which one of those two tools I need to use for that day. Unfortunately, I'm coming up. I don't have time to get into it further. What I will do is send you an email. If you're watching a replay of this webinar and you don't have my email list, or you're not on my email list, then what you can do is type into the chat box that you see right down here. Or if you're watching it on YouTube or something like that, just leave a comment with your actual email if you're willing to do that, and you can get that information. I will send out an email to everyone that has registered for this webcast with more information about the HeartMath and Muse technology and where you can get it and so forth. Again, got to wet my whistle. Hold on. All right. And finally, mindset. You know, part of the psychology is we also have the correct mindset. One of my clients, I think he has the best mindset that I've come across so far to handle stress and handle worry. He's highly successful in business, and he describes his life as extremely stressful. And you know what he says? He says he doesn't want to ever have it any different, any other way, because he thrives on that stress. He uses it as a motivating force to get his butt off the couch and to drive his ambition. What a great thing to take that worry. Think about it. It's energy, folks. That's why it's driving us crazy. It's this pin-up energy. How about if we learn to route that energy into motivating us to do something, to become something, to have a frickin' 10 times super life, as Grant Cardone would call it. That's the thing to do. So as you strengthen your physical body, as you strengthen your neurological systems, and you work on patterning your psychology, also work on that mindset. And what you can do and who you become is still an open book, no matter what age you are. So question and answers, unfortunately, I'm not going to have time to cover question and answers, but for those of you who have registered for this, and I send you the email about the Muse, please feel free to respond to that email with any questions that you have, and I will do my best to answer the questions. So that's it for this evening, folks. And I am Labron Allen here in Victoria, Texas with the Natural Health Clinic. I really enjoyed you sharing this time with me today. Signing off.